Starting this step, let's shift our attention to storing user credentials. Until now, we have been configuring our user credentials in our application.properties. We have our username and user password configured in here. What this is making use of in the background is a in-memory storage. Let's see better ways of doing that in this specific step. User credentials can be stored in memory. This can be good for test purposes. This is not recommended for production. The other options are database. For example, you can use JDBC or JPA to access the credentials, and you can integrate Spring Security with the tables which are stored in your database. Another popular option is LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. This is an open protocol for directory services and authentication. Until now, we have been using in-memory configuration. Our in-memory configuration was based on the values which we configured in application.properties. The problem with configuring in application.properties is that you can only have one user ID and password configured in here. What if you don't want to have more user IDs and password? Let's see how to configure multiple users in memory, and we'll also see how to use a database to store your credentials in the subsequent steps. Let's get started with creating multiple users. I'll go over to basic auth security configuration, and this is where we can configure our user details service bean. So I'll say public user details service. I'll say user details service, no parameters in, and let's open brace and have a close brace and return new in memory user details manager. Let's organize imports. You'd see a couple of imports come in memory user details manager, which is coming from org Spring Framework security provisioning, and you'll also have user details service, org Spring Framework security core user details service. You can see that user details service is the core interface which loads user specific data. Whenever you want to get the user details, this is the interface we'll be making use of. And the in-memory user details manager, which is present in here, is a non-persistent implementation of the user details manager. So if you save this right now, if I go ahead, application.properties, comment this out and save this and start the application out and go to console, you'd see that the application would start up if you try and fire a request from earlier. If you do a send, you'd get a 401 back, not authorized, because we don't have any users configured right now. So right now we have disabled all the users. What we want to do now is to create the users. How can I create the users? I can make use of user dot with user name. So I'll want to configure a username of in 28 minutes, and this would return a builder back, so you can configure all the other details as well. Dot password. For now, we will not use any encoding, and that's why I'm going to use no op. We'll talk about encoding, hashing, and encryption a little later. For now, let's store the password as is in 28 minutes dummy. And I would assign a role. So for any user, you can assign roles. You can assign multiple roles in here. For this specific user, I would assign a role of user. If you want, you can assign more roles in here. I would just assign one role. And after that, you can do a build. So this would create a user. I'll do a control1 or command1, and I'll say assign statement to a new local variable. So I'll say var user is equal to this. Now we would want to build multiple users, right? So we'll go ahead and build another user. So var admin is equal to username admin. I'll leave the password the same, and the role I would want to assign to him is admin. One of the best practices with respect to roles is to create a enum with all your roles. I'll leave it as an exercise for you. Create an enum, and you can make use of the enum value in here. So you'll have an enum with user and admin. This would be enum.user, and this would be enum.admin. So we have created the users. We need to pass them out to the in-memory user details manager constructor. So I'll say user, comma, admin. Application has restarted. Pick the change app. Let's go over to our create user post request from earlier and say send. Nice. We are getting a 200 now. And if I directly go there in the browser, you can also use the admin password. So I can say admin and dummy and say sign in. And this is executing the retrieve to-dos for a specific user request. In this step, we got started with creating our own users. To get started, we created everything in memory. Storing details in memory is good for test purposes, but not recommended for production. Next step, let's see how to store details in a database. What we'll be doing is we'll be making use of JDBC to retrieve the credentials. I'll see you in the next step.